You're listening to the ESO Network, your station for all things geek.
Hello, world, and welcome to Tales from Hollywoodland, a veritable feast of movies, television, Broadway, showbiz stories, and even a little bit of news and gossip with Julian Schlossberg, Arthur E. Friedman, Stephen J. Rubin, and I'm your producer and announcer, Mike Faber. Today, we talk to author Kevin Goetz, talking about his book, How to Score in Hollywood. And now, here's Steve.
Oh my God, Mike, you're beginning to sound like Ed McMahon every day now.
Hey-o.
Hey-o, all I need is that curtain. Kevin, your book is wonderful. It is talk about being on the front lines of every major motion picture that's been produced for the last 40 years, it seems like. But I just love your insight and the angle you come from. My first comment, I'll jump in. When I was a kid, Hollywood would occasionally throw a summer action picture to me, like a Sinbad movie. Obviously, there were Disney movies, but the kid market was not a priority for Hollywood. You know, we were lucky if we got 2 or 3 low-budget science fiction movies every season. These days, it seems like Hollywood is producing almost entirely for the kid market. Every movie, every expensive movie seems to be some big science fiction Marvel epic, soaking up a lot of the money that goes towards movies. It was even once explained to me that if Coppola brought Godfather to Hollywood today, it would probably go on a streaming channel, maybe HBO Max. But do you think there's a future for adult drama in Hollywood? I mean, on the mainstream studio side?
Well, first of all, Steve, thanks for having me. Same with you, Julian and Arthur. Appreciate it. And Mike for that introduction. You know, I don't think that it's as doom and gloom as you're painting it. I do think that the business has shifted dramatically. I do not think that most big movies are for families per se, but families are a component of the big economics that need to keep the studios, we're talking about the studios, up and running. So, for example, the movies that are working right now typically are either 4-quadrant movies, which are not kids. They're usually PG-13 or R-rated movies that have 4 quadrants that are checking the boxes of audience engagement and attendance. Males say under 25 or 30, females under 25 or 30, females over and males over. And when we talk about family films, I typically use the word octant, which are essentially boys, girls, moms, dads, teen boys, teen girls, general audience non-parent males, and general audience non-parent females. And a movie like Wicked probably checks 6 of the 8 octants, probably with the exception of teen boys and maybe non-parent males. And Zootopia checks all 8 in terms of the octants. But there are movies like choosing just one, Sinners, for example, that did very well domestically, that really was a 4-quadrant movie, but not a family movie. And it still had a significant budget, et cetera, et cetera. So there's still adult fare that can work. Your question about dramas, though, yeah, it's really, really hard. And the reason is the benchmark, the level to get people to leave their home in today's world has exponentially increased. To get people to participate in a call to action, that is, I'm going to go to see this movie on Friday or Saturday night, spend this much money. I mean, a family of four, just to put it in perspective, is close to $80 with concessions, tickets, parking. That's a lot of money. It may be the cheapest alternative outside of the house for entertainment, but it's still a lot of money for most folks when you can buy 5 streaming services for the same amount of money. So if you think about the consumer, the audience, and you say that benchmark is so much greater, sure, you're going to get eventized type of movies that are succeeding at the box office from the major studios. And that will continue to happen. It just has to. The economics don't warrant it happening any other way.
Interesting, very interesting. I'm not as pessimistic as I sounded. I mean, I still love the movies, and I still want. I guess personally, it's very interesting. I used to have the ritual on a Friday where I'd open up the newspaper, and there would be 10 full-page ads, and I'd probably check 8 of them as saying, I want to see that. Now, of course, there are no newspaper ads anymore. There are no ads that I can think of anywhere other than seeing something on television. It's just a strange world.
Steve, we have to look at it generationally. So
Right.
we're all essentially in the same age group on this podcast, and we, as either boomers on the last year of the boomer or Gen X, have a different relationship than do the millennials and Gen Zs, and certainly new Alpha coming up. We have a nostalgic relationship with movies, with movie going. We feel a certain kind of emotional resonance when we think about going to a movie. Maybe you had your first, hug or put your arm around your girlfriend, or maybe you had a birthday party that was surrounded and or at the center of the birthday was going to a movie, right? That's not like the case anymore. We went to the movies. The younger generations go to a movie. They go see a title. Very similar to what the networks went through and cables just 15 years ago, 20 years ago. People were not watching necessarily NBC or ABC. They were watching a show on NBC or ABC or Fox or CBS. They were watching a show on Bravo, or a show on Nickelodeon, or a show on MTV. And that is part of the changing environment in which you have to view all entertainment now, particularly movies, because the whole ecosystem has shifted in the priorities. Listen, for years and years, you guys, we had the studios in the driver's seat dictating what movies the audience was going to see every given week, right? There were 2 or 3 big movies that came out. You don't like it, lump it. You had home entertainment titles that hit the street on these dates. You don't like it, lump it, or you'll choose something else. And those were disruptions from sound to from silence to sound, from color to from radio to television, from television to home entertainment. Home entertainment, more movies begot more movies. It was going to be the death knell of the industry, if you remember. Then when the streaming revolution or disruption happened, that became a different kind of disruption, almost a non-recoverable one from what we grew up with. Not to say it's good or bad, to put a judgment on it. But suddenly, content was viewed differently because 3 things converged at once: cost, convenience, and choice. They never came together in such a way. Cost, we started to get conscious of choice when 3D was big and IMAX and big screens charged a premium. People said, oh, that's expensive. Oh, I'm actually paying more for that now. That was never really contemplated. Convenience is because it's much more convenient to see something at home. And choice, it's unbelievable. Not only is it ubiquitous and huge in the number of choices, but they're great choices. Television is phenomenal. And even movies for television or have made for the streamers, many of them are quite wonderful. So that confluence changed the way movies are seen in theaters forever. Because suddenly the consumer is in the driver's seat. Never happened before. Saying, oh, you don't want to give me this movie this week? Well, I can see 68 other things or 16 other things. Like, that's why the windowing doesn't have the same resonance for younger people who have no patience and no attention spans. They want something now, and if they're not going to get it, they'll get something else that'll be just as good. There's exceptions to that, but by and large, that's the phenomenon that has taken place.
Kevin, this is Arthur. Julian and I have owned and operated movie theaters some years ago, a lot of movie theaters. So I'm more than familiar with the business, as is Julian. And my forte was film buying. I was always in charge of putting film into these theaters. And I was always convinced through the years that the only sure thing in the film business was that there was going to be surprises, good ones and bad ones. And it seems to be true to this day. A big hit picture turns out to be a dud. Something unthinkable becomes a huge hit. That always remains. I will say this. The whole sell of the movie industry for years now, certainly since COVID, has been go to the theater, go to the movie theater, enjoy it. The Boston Red Sox years ago tried to sell going to the ballpark when they attendance flattened out, and their whole theme was seeing it in person is twice as much fun. Whatever. I think that battle is lost to the demographics of maybe 40 plus, certainly intelligentsia. I think seeing movies at home, the kind of movies that we like, the Tootsies, the Kramer versus Kramer's, story-driven movies, I think that's gone. I think that's for the home. My wife and I watched Blue Moon the other night at home for $19.50. It was a struggle. It was a struggle watching it as a film that has the ability to be a commercial film, so to speak. But it was a convenience struggle. So easy to sit back in my office chair and watch this thing. So it's a different business. Oppenheimer comes along, you'll get those event pictures every now and then that will break through. That will happen. But we were talking earlier about family films, Zootopia as an example today. But those films, which years ago were unthinkable to be staple, a Disney movie would always do it. But apart from that, there was nothing much to the business of animation. Of course, it's become a whole different thing now, because in the theater business, as we know, the concession stand is kind of where profit's at. And when you hit with a family film or an animated film, those kids are coming with you. And you're going to buy cop popcorn. And so you've got that. That's become the biggest thing in the business. That and horror films, because the teenagers go to see horror films. They're always out there. So,
I'm gonna jump in real quickly with Kevin. Kevin, did you became one of the true research mavens in the business, but I bet you didn't go to school to learn how to be a research maven.
No, I did not. I did not at all. And if you told 13-year-old Kevin that he was not going to be a movie star or a Broadway star, he would have been really, really upset and catatonic, probably, because I was so single focused on that for years and years. If you said I was going to be in research, I would have been like, "Ugh, please, God, no." But I do, before we go into that, if I may, I just want to, Arthur brought up some great points and I couldn't agree more with him. The key to what you're saying, Arthur, again, goes back to what I was saying, which is if you have something that is elevated, and elevated drama is Oppenheimer. That's the epitome of an elevated drama. I mean, everything from the Nolan of it all, from the cast, from the subject matter, the huge visuals, the special effects, etc., puts it in that very fine class. you can announce the drama is dead until Oppenheimer comes along, and then suddenly it's not dead. Same with that Sidney Sweeney and Glenn Powell movie from Sony that came out last year, directed by Will Gluck, which was I forget, Anyone But You or something like that was called. Anyone
But You.
Yeah. Look, the romantic comedy is dead until you have two of the sexiest people on the planet in a movie that everyone wanted to see, at least everybody in the demo that it was geared for. So that was elevated. Many horror movies are not working. The ones that are, Black Phone, are elevated horror movies. I got criticized for this a week ago. I was in the New York Times, quoted in a piece, a Book Barnes piece, and someone criticized me for agreeing with this notion. I want to be super clear about something. This is not a judgment on my part. I'm on the board of the American Cinematheque. I love movie theaters. I spend my life in movie theaters. I wish everything were in a movie theater. It's not the case. It's just not happening now. So looking at it, more objectively and saying, what is working now? What's working now are things that are elevated and experiential and are event-like. What's not working, I saw Christie in my house. Now I do have a theater in my home, and I'm on the Bel Air circuit. And so I get to bring first run movies in. And I saw Christie, which is, again, a Sidney Sweeney movie about her as a boxer, right, from Black Bear. It is a terrific picture, worthy of an Academy Award nomination from her and also from Ben Foster, who plays her manager or trainer / husband. Nobody saw it. The same is true with the Jennifer Lawrence movie, the drama. That was Lynn Ramsey's movie. Again, a terrific performance, worthy of seeing. Nobody saw it. Why?
Why?
Because you and your wife said it. You didn't need to leave your home to see that movie.
It's true.
And when you unpack what that really means, for everybody's a little different. Everyone has their criteria. For me, I want to see something in a theater with the greatest reviews and word of mouth ever. That to me is a kind of a beacon or a North Star of what I want to see in a theater, because that to me makes it experiential. Everyone's talking about, I want to be in on it, and I'd like to see it in its best format.
I want to try something, if I may.
Yeah.
Julian, when's the last time you and Maren went to see a movie in the theater?
It's over a year ago.
What was the movie, Julian?
I don't remember, Kevin. I just don't remember. But what I'd like to talk to you about, number one, is how good this book is. You have written a terrific book about what.
But I loved you beforehand. I just want to say anyway. I've been a fan of yours and Arthur's and Steve's. So I'm not. You don't have to say that, but I am enormously appreciative of that.
I don't have to say it, and fortunately, I'm happy to say it that it's truthful. Now, since you spend a lot of time in Hollywood, you don't necessarily hear the truth very often. But the truth is, this book is really special because of many things. And let's talk about those things. Number one, let's talk about the importance of the beginning of a movie, which you go into, which is important, of the end of a movie, how important the ending is. And since I spent a lot of my life on Broadway, in musicals, as you know, because you wanted to be a song and dance man, there's
still am one, Julian, by the way. Still am one.
All right, but you wanted to be one on Broadway.
Yes, correct.
You're 3,000 miles away. Anyhow, what I was going to say was there's something called the 11 o'clock number, as you know, and that's the musical. That's how, let's say, Nathan Lane ends The Producers by giving you the whole musical. Now, in a movie, we both know, and you go into it in great detail, the importance of a beginning and the end. So would you do that now with a little bit with us?
There's two beginnings that when you mention beginning, that I go through my mind, because How to Score in Hollywood really focuses on the beginning before the movie is even shot, meaning the budgeting, the correct understanding of the potential audience. Because time and time again, I see movie after movie where I'll say, and we've all done this, where you look at the movie and you go, how did they make that for this much money? It's so impressive. But more than that, you say, how did they make this movie? Who the hell spent so much money on it?
Why did they make
Why
it?
did they make it? Someone's going to lose a lot of money. That, to me, was an interesting unpacking. That needed unpacking and understanding of why that happened. Because I have a thought. It's very dramatic. A statement, which is every movie, if made and marketed for the right price, should make money. Every movie. Because I've worked on over 5,000 titles in my career. And I have to tell you that there is an audience for somebody for every movie. It might be an audience of one. It might be an audience of 100. Know that going in, and shame on you if you don't, because you're going to ultimately make it for too much money if there is not an audience to support it. That has to do with the venue. Arthur, is this going to be theatrical or a streamer? Because if you're going to be theatrical, you got to plan on spending, if it's a small movie, $5 to $8 million on marketing domestically. If it's a studio level movie, what, $40, $50 million domestically on marketing? Maybe 30 if it's not for everybody. And then the international marketing, it changes the equation. In this book, challenge the filmmaker, the film student, the studio head, the producers to really look at those pink and those yellow flags before they become a problem. And if you do it correctly, you're going to be that much more ahead of the 8 ball than if you don't do that. And I unpack how that is, how you get that check mark. Now let's talk about the movies made and the beginning and an ending of a movie. Both really important. The beginning of a movie, by the way, has taken on a whole different weight since the advent of streamers, because many people will tune out in the first 4 to 8 to 10 minutes of a movie. So I warn a lot of filmmakers, top class feature film filmmakers who are used to the movie going experience, where people can relax into a movie, can feel that they're going to give it the time. Not so at home. You don't like something, you could be out. And you better know that. So these whole introduction of a cold opening, of grabbing the audience right out of the gate, is actually changing the way in which writers need to be thinking about holding the audience's attention. Same with trailers. Used to be, the old test where the Burke test where you'd peek at the very end. You can't. You got to grab them by the what's right now, and you hold them and then have to continue up. So you're starting at a much higher level. So you got to do that with movies that are streaming movies. The beginning also has to often lay the right foundation for the payoff at the end. How many times do we have an ending problem? Well, the ending problem isn't necessarily a dissatisfaction at the ending per se. It is lack of setup from the beginning. So the ending actually cannot be solved unless you either reshoot or add or highlight something in the beginning that is going to pay off at the end. And as far as the endings go, the most successful movies and most successful endings have both an intellectual and an emotional satisfaction. That is to say, intellectual, essentially everything's answered. Doesn't have to be answered with every dot, dotted and every T crossed. Doesn't have to be that. It just needs to feel like questions were answered. And an emotional feeling. Does this move me? It doesn't have to be happy. It could be a tragedy. But is it moving me? Was this 2-hour journey worth it for me to be on? Those things are super important in the success of a movie. And why is the ending really, really important? Often people will forget what's before it if the ending is really satisfying on those two levels, because they're going to definitely recommend it to their friends. And you and I and anyone who's worked in exhibition knows that word of mouth, that all important word of mouth, is something that we strive for to understand in the screening process when we're testing movies before they hit the theaters, because we're trying to gauge getting that number as high as we possibly can get it. Because the difference between a norm let's say a 50 definite recommend, and 20 points above that, a 70, could translate into tens of millions of dollars more at the box office based on that 20-point delta, that 20-point spread could give you that much more legs, that many more legs, that much more advocacy and evangelism that's going to drive better box office.
Well, since nobody ever wins 100%, tell us where you went awry, where you were. Where was there ever a couple of times where you said, "Oh my God, we really missed it this time"?
Well, yeah, of course. I mean, I miss it a lot. The question is, do I miss it direction? Not often, truthfully. And it's not me, Julian. I make mistakes every day of my life personally. But I like to say this, and I mean it. The audience is never wrong. Like never. Like when you're testing material with an audience in any product category, whatever. And if you're doing it methodologically sound, you've got good research hygiene, we say, right? You're going to have good sample because garbage in, garbage out. If you don't talk to the right people, you want to ask the questions in a way that are the way to ask them that are most scientifically unbiased. If you're doing all that stuff, you're going to get feedback. And if I were to say, Julian, you're wrong, I'm denying your feelings. And any of us who've been in therapy, and God knows I've been in therapy for many years. I've now graduated, thank God. But, it's great. But you learn that your feelings are your feelings. No one can take that away from you. So when 300 people are telling you they're feeling this way, and you as a filmmaker or a studio head or whatever it may be, choose not to listen, avoid them at your own peril, man. I mean, they're telling you something. I've said this before, when you're on a freeway and, somebody hunks at you on the freeway, they're an a-hole. But when 6 or 7 people hunk at you on the freeway, you're the a-hole. And if you choose not to listen to 62% of your audience telling you that it is too long and they're losing engagement, what are you going to do? Choose not to listen? You lessen your definite recommend scores. You lessen your chance of people recommending it. And you're lessening, the success of the movie. And then it comes into the question of, is there a fiduciary responsibility by filmmakers? I believe there is. The art of filmmaking is not one that is 95, 98% of the time, 99% of the time, an auteur experience. In other words, people don't raise their own money, star in their movies, write it, direct it, edit it. Most people don't do that. Most movies are made with a capitalistic, motivation. They want to make money and they want to be seen by people. And it requires many crafts folks to get there. It's not a singular, it's maybe a singular vision, but it cannot be executed without, tens, if not hundreds, in the case of animation, thousands of people. And that requires, I think, creatives really thinking in a fiscally responsible way.
I think you've answered everything but my question. What has anything that you've done gone awry? Have it been where you were surprised? I'm interested.
You want me to give you a title though, but I can't talk out of school by giving you a title of a movie because I work on nearly everyone's movies. So I'd have to be shot or. Well, I don't need the title. I'm just kind of interested in. Look, we know the famous. We're all in players. We know the famous Jeffrey Katzenberg memo, supposedly leaked to Variety. It's in the book. It's in the book. Of course, it's in the book. That's why I'm bringing it up. And by the way, Julian, isn't it so relevant today?
That's what you say in the book.
It could have been written written this week. I mean, seriously. I just saw Jeffrey at a party 2 weeks ago, and I wanted to bring that up to him. I didn't, but I next time I see him, I will. Yes. So there's time.
What is the quote, guys? Please tell me the quote.
Well, it's not a quote. It's a missive that Jeffrey wrote to his staff back in when was it, in the early 90s or
90s,
late 80s?
91, I think. Yeah.
Yeah, I think it was.
Yeah.
Where he basically said that a bunch of things about the state of the business and what we need to be thinking about. And it was, look, we are in the business of making movies, not making art. Sometimes when you make movies, you make art, but we're not making art for art's sake. And that's essentially, right, when you say, Julian, the thesis behind what he said. And it wasn't to put down anything. I hate people thinking that, what I do is in some way offensive to art. I am an artist through and through. I'll take anyone on that wants to out art me. And I'm only a practical guy who is trying to take principles that I've learned over years and years of what makes things successful. And now, Julian, I'd like to answer your question, if I could, by saying that there is interpretation involved in almost everything I do. So it's not the audience that's wrong. It might be in the interpretation. So I have to say that my staff, my people that work with me are pretty damn good. But there are times when we're interpreting something that could be interpreted another way. And I'm the first to admit that. But it usually is highly and rigorously discussed and taken apart so that we can advise the filmmaker the best route. In other words, there's many ways to fix a problem. Some are editorial, some require reshoots. I typically never go into a meeting talking about the R word because it's a little bit beyond my pay grade, and it's a little bit presumptuous to assume that someone's going to invest more money in something. I'll usually know that going into a post-mortem meeting, let's say, to discuss results. But I know often that I will recommend something editorially, and I know intuitively it is probably not going to work because the audience is really saying this and this. But I will say, let's go here, let's try this, knowing that it probably won't work. And that happens more often than you'd think, because you really do want to try everything editorially first. It's the cheapest way to fix a problem. And the worst part is once they do, and you have now endorsed a reshoot, and the numbers come back the same. That has happened to me on more than one occasion. You kind of feel really bad because you were a part of that as well. I have to say that, thank God, it's more accurate than not. It's more, I'm more right than wrong, but damn, it hurts when you are earnestly trying to fix something and it's just not being bought by that audience.
I remember one of the great research revelations going back to a Michael Douglas, Glenn Close movie called Fatal Attraction, where they tested the movie with a different ending than the ending we got, and it tested horribly. I think, as I recall, the Glenn Close character actually triumphs in the end, and Michael Douglas and his wife don't. But
no, she commits suicide.
She commits suicide. Okay,
death by suicide. Yes, she commits suicide while Madame Butterfly is playing, but in a way, she won. To your point, Steve, because what it didn't do, and by the way, it did not test poorly. It tested well. It didn't test outstandingly well. I worked on it, and we tested it in various places. But the problem was the ending was just not emotionally satisfying. Intellectually, I mean, Glenn Close, I heard this through, I don't know, it was Adrian Lyne or Michael or Sherry Lansing might have told me. The thing that happened was Glenn actually went to her either friend or somebody who is a psychoanalyst who talked about unpack the character, and they talked about the character and said, what would the character do? And the character would have most likely taken her own life. So intellectually, even the audience got that. But damn, oh damn, Michael Douglas is never going to feel like he got any kind of retribution, and God only knows Ann Archer didn't get that as the wronged wife. So that is when we discovered we have got to do something here, and the reshoot was constructed, which is now a very, very famous reshoot of the bathroom ending, where she comes out of the bathtub. Spoiler alert! And as I'm saying spoiler alert. And Michael Douglas kills Colette with his own hands. We feel really great. The bitch is dead, but Ann Archer, what is the best part of the ending, is finishes the job, comes in and takes her out when we think she's dead, but she's not. Comes in, shoots her, and the audience, it was like a wave of people. The audience was already excellent and very good, but primarily in the very good. So the definite recommend was lowish. Soon as that new ending, it was moved, all those are very goods moved up to excellent. So the definite recommend moved up to the excellence, and it became the phenomenon that it is.
If it had tested so well, why did they feel the need, or why did you feel the need to go back? It wasn't satisfying enough?
Two things. You didn't need me or any researcher to tell you that you felt the air suck out of the room in the final 5 minutes. That's number one. But when we did the research and we saw the high very goods, that usually means something is holding them back. Not always, but that is an often occurrence. We would then do the focus group, 20 people, stay after the subset of the whole audience to participate in a focus group. What did you like, everyone? I like this. I like this. I like this. What didn't you like? In unison, the ending. 4 screenings, the ending. It was like rehearsed. Now, an audience is not going to tell you how to fix it. Let's be clear. That requires the creatives. But they're telling you what they're not buying and what they don't like, and that they're not engaged. You know, Steve Jobs always said he didn't believe in research, apparently, right? He didn't love research. But God knows they used a lot of research to get to the technology, because he said people can't tell you what they want. That may be true, but they can certainly tell you what they don't want and what they don't like. So to your point, are you trying to get every answer? You said it, Julian. No one's 100% right, ever. I am a tool. Research is a tool. And if you use it as such, you're going to be better off than the person who doesn't. Because market intelligence is a smart thing. It's data. You don't want to listen? Don't listen. But to go, I sounded like my father when I just said that. Don't forget about it. You know.
Kevin, Kevin, excuse me for interrupting. You struck a nerve earlier when we were talking about the length of movies. It seems to me, and I see this a lot, particularly in action movies, where they seem to go a little like a half hour longer than they need to be. Now, I've studied the James Bond movies for 40 years. I've written 6 books on the subject. It's kind of my area. To find out that the last James Bond film, No Time to Die, came in at 2:45 was stunning to me. I mean, if Albert R. Broccoli and Harry Saltzman had been alive, they would have been they would be really pissed off, because a Bond movie should be 2 hours. Do you have a comment on length? Because there's a lot of movies that seem to be very long now.
Well, I agree with you. I think there's been a gradual shift to long movies. That phenomenon started really in COVID, when many movies weren't testing because we couldn't get into theaters. I then invested and built a virtual screening platform for the second half of COVID. But for the first half, there were a lot of movies, and I would watch movie after movie that were in the can already, that didn't go through the screening process, that were coming out way longer than they should. And but I say should, I mean by audience consensus, by reviews, by the audience feedback that I would just get. And that was because they allowed the filmmakers to have the final cut. And that's dangerous very often. because most filmmakers are not objective enough, I believe, to listen to the audience and to respond. I work with some of the greatest that have ever walked the planet. The great ones to me do listen. They do listen. I am not an advocate. I don't believe what you said about it should be 2 hours as opposed to it could be 2:45 if it warrants 2:45. The problem is most movies don't warrant the lengths they're at. Let me say not most. Many movies don't warrant the length that they are, and they become very indulgent and masturbatory and self-conscious almost and self-aware because they're so precious. And the great thing about movies and the visual art of cinematic arts is to see something and not necessarily have to have exposition and tremendous explanation. Show it visually and do it for half the length. So there's a lot of reasons. So recent memory, recent 5 years, 6 years, I would say, some of that has to do with the filmmakers that came up during COVID or didn't come up in COVID, but were given that latitude. But the phenomenon has been happening over the last pre-COVID with some of these superhero movies. I think many of the, particularly the Marvel movies, there was an obligation to feed the audience a really full meal. And the idea of a full meal is if it's longer, it's better. But that's not the case. And I think it's exhausted audiences. I think the younger two generations are now very conscious of things being too long. They just don't have that attention span anymore. And you could like it or not like it. It's just what it is.
Sometimes it depends. I mean, I saw the last Quentin Tarantino movie, Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, and that could have been 6 hours and I would have been riveted because I found
Stevie, I called you Stevie. Stevie, you answered your own question.
I did. I mean, there are times, but lately though,
I thought The Brutalist, for example, everyone said, God, everyone said it's so long, it's so long. I did not think that. I thought it was appropriately the length because I was completely engaged.
What about and this is a little bit of a tangent, but two of our biggest filmmakers and had huge successes in the past, Francis Ford Coppola and Kevin Costner, bring out what I would consider to be, and I have to say I have not seen Francis' movie, but I did watch Kevin's Western. I found it to be very bloated and just crazy, but it seems to me that
Dances with Wolves?
No. This
I would think not.
The Western that he self-financed.
Right. It was it's supposedly part of there were supposed to be 4 films. I think he may have shot a second one, but I don't know. I was surprised because I think Kevin Costner is a very sharp filmmaker. I mean, not just Dances with Wolves. He's been involved with other films, but I'm just curious what you thought of those two pictures.
I'm going to say this, and Julian, this is directed to you. When I sell the second half of my company and I decide to hang this up, I may finance a Broadway show that I am in. Okay?
Go, Kevin, go.
I'm going to tell you this. It probably makes no financial sense. I don't care if it's great or not good, but it will have ticked a box off for me. And I'm pretty damn good. I have to tell you the truth. Like, I'm not just bullshitting you. Like I went to the best acting conservatory in the country at the time at Rutgers Mason Gross School of the Arts. I studied with some of the best folks. I made my living as an actor for years. I made my living as an actor for 20 years. And I'm vested in the unions, etc. So I just want to give you perspective. It's not just someone with a dream. But you start on Broadway, and I might like to. And I would do it myself. How stupid is that?
You may not have to. You may have to contact
me. I know. But what I'm saying is that is the respect I have for both Kevin and for Francis. Because Francis took all of his savings, his life savings, essentially, and put it on the line for a dream. And you got to respect that, man. I don't even care about the movie. The movie, I saw it. I don't care to comment on it. I wasn't a huge fan of it, but it wasn't the disaster that everyone said. It's probably, who knows, in 20 years, people might say it's a masterpiece. But he's one of the greatest filmmakers, as you said, as is Kevin Costner. I think Kevin Costner is brilliant talent as a director. It was bloated. It felt long. I think he was so far into it that I'm not sure how much. I didn't test it, so I can't speak to if he did test it, but I personally didn't do it. But I imagine that much could have been, shortened and made truncated and actually made better. But, God bless him. It was his vision. That goes into that, when I said the 99%, that's the 1% that, God love them. They paid for it. They're doing it. They don't need to have a fiscal responsibility because it's something they've always wanted to do.
And that was the strength of John Cassavetes. Now, whether you liked his movies, whether you didn't like them, I represented him.
100% correct. And I'm just going to say, without name dropping, but Jenna Rollins was one of my dearest friends. May she rest in peace. I never got to know John, but I do know all the kids, Nick, Zan, and Zoe. And John was exactly that guy, because I didn't know him, but I heard everything about him. And he followed his heart. Do you know Jenna followed her heart as an actress? They would sometimes do a picture only to pay for the stuff they wanted to do. So they might do a studio picture. But Jenna was never about the accolades and the awards. She was always about the work. And
John called me from...
You learned that from John.
I'm going to say John called me from Italy because I represented him on A Woman Under the Influence and Faces and Shadows and A Killing of a Chinese Bookie. And he called me and I said, what are you calling from Italy? Why are you calling? Why are you in Italy? He said, I'm doing this lousy movie, but I'm getting $750,000 and I'm going to take it and make... And he made opening night with that movie. And that's the kind of person I really admired.
Oh, Julian, this is the best part of this interview because I can talk about that forever. It just touches my heart so deeply. I get emotional when I talk about it because the level of artistry and the commitment to the art of filmmaking. I mean, they embodied it, man. They did it. I miss that house so much. I'm sure you've spent time in that house where they shot Woman Under the Influence and so many other movies. Oh my God!
I trust we were all around when Godfather was coming out, and everybody heard in the industry was, "It's too long. It's too long." That was and that's happened a number of times. It becomes a theme for weeks ahead of the release of a movie, or that it's too long, and everything. Apocalypse Now was too long. Godfather was loud and clear that it was too long until it opened, and it went. It was of course great. I'm curious to know something, Kevin. So I'm at a preview in Boston, outside of Boston, Framingham, Massachusetts, with a gentleman who was my mentor and dear friend, Sumner Redstone. This is long before Paramount and what have you. We're sitting there with a packed house on a Friday night watching a preview of Jaws. And the audience was screaming. It was a reaction that you could only dream of. And Sumner said to me at the end, "This movie is no sure thing. It's too violent." So there, of course, you hear that kind of stuff all the time. Private Benjamin, who's going to believe a Jewish girl in the army? I mean, I've heard all this kind of crap, like we all have. I'd love to know a movie you've seen both ways that you thought was fantastic and would do big business and didn't, and also a movie that the flip side.
Well, I remember, for whatever reason, a movie called Congo, to answer the second part of the question, which was a movie that tested okay, but not great, and it did great business. I remember another movie The Purge, the first Purge, which scored well, but not extraordinary. But both of them had the concept so strongly baked into the advertising that people got it in a second, and it was the coolest concept, and it drove the success of those movies, which I think is really, really interesting. The movie that I didn't think was going to do well, that did so well, was Get Out, I think, is one example. It didn't test extraordinarily well. It tested well enough. And the reason I'm bringing up these examples, these are all in either my first book, Audienceology, or in this book, so I have permission. Just for those cynics who are listening going, I thought he doesn't talk about
title.
So Simon & Schuster, yeah, thank you. So Get Out was an interesting movie, an interesting picture, but it was slightly weird. It was Jordan Peele's debut, but it certainly raised these questions that were very much in vogue at the time about DEI, diversity, equity, inclusion, and racism, and both on the white side and the black side. And I remember testing advertising materials. We actually went into I have a facility called Engine Works in North Hollywood, where we have 2 theaters, 48-seat theaters, where they do most of the dial testing for television shows and so forth. We went in there and we had 2 audiences in 2 separate theaters. One African-American, black, the other one Caucasian. And it was so interesting to unpack the different responses for the advertising materials from the 2 different audiences. So they basically created this bifurcated campaign, and it worked beautifully because it touched people with these cultural cues in a different way. But I didn't see all that initially. So the fact that it became a phenomenon,
huge hit,
is great. Huge
well,
hit.
It had the most satisfactory ending I have seen in pictures in a long time. I mean, I came out of that theater just blitzed with joy from what happened.
And to answer Arthur's question, I think it was before regarding Godfather, I do think that would be a streamer at this point if I were a betting man, because it's one of my 10 favorite pictures of all time. But it is, it's a drama. And now, so many things have come after it to rip it off that if it was the first of its kind out of the gate, it'd be maybe more difficult to immediately say streamer. But think of a movie like it. What is like it? Goodfellas, maybe? That would also probably be a streaming movie. Look at Scorsese's last movies that have been, on streamers.
Kevin,
does it get any better than Marty Scorsese?
You mentioned the advertising cost to market a movie today nationally, 10, 20, 30, up to $50 million. It seems to me that
up to 100 million.
$100 million. I mean, obviously, when Sony makes a Spider-Man movie for $250 million and plunks another $100 million, their research shows that they can make $1 billion, which I understand that. Here's a question, though. Tesla, probably one of the biggest brands on the planet right now, does no television advertising. I've never seen a Tesla ad. It's all word of mouth. Do you envision a future where the studios could actually release movies without doing television?
Not until we solve the issue of reach and frequency. Because even for the wide releases right now, you kind of need network and broadcast advertising still to cast in a very short amount of time the kind of numbers that get people aware of something. I know this from tracking, which is why I'm saying it. And where do you get that? Mostly sports, some news, live events.
Right.
by and large, I haven't seen a commercial in ages. Now, I watched a football game on Thanksgiving and I saw what is very common now, which is this split screen where the half is the ad and they continue the play. They only do that for like one thing for a commercial break, but they don't do multiple. But it's out of desperation, but I watched the ad. I watched the ad. It was a Grinch thing. It was a Grinch takeoff. I can't even tell you the product, but it was a Grinch thing. But I did see it. I was forced to see it because I wanted to see the end of that play and see Travis Kelce kind of do a little dance or whatever, because it was the end of it. But it forced me to watch it. I don't watch ads, so I don't know how people are reaching people anymore. And digitally is very difficult still to create the same kind of reach and frequency using digital advertising. That is more used for psychographically driven movies, attitudes and behaviors where you can target very singular and specifically and hit them hard. The other thing, the area that I would say right now is an untapped area is the influence area. A company that I happen to be on the board of, which is SGG, is a brilliant company of SGG essentially is the agent, if you will, for about 2,300 influencers, micro-influencers. You know what a micro-influencer is these days? 25,000 to 100,000 followers. But for all sports teams around the United States, every sport. So imagine when you aggregate all of those people together, it's 87 million people. But you can get very particular. For example, I worked on a movie that had the theme of, it was called, I think, The Green and the Gold, which is the Green Bay Packers, if I'm not mistaken. And we were able to go in and just find geographically targeted people around the Wisconsin DMA. And that's, to me, another way to really make an impact, which is why I joined the board, because you want to be able to find these niche audiences with big voices, influencers or micro-influencers. Micro-influencers actually have more weight because you're in a very small environment hearing trusted voices, as opposed to a big celebrity, which is a macro-influencer saying, do this. You know, I remember working on some philanthropic thing. I think it was with Peter Chernin with mosquito nets in Africa, something at one point years ago. And we learned that these biggest folks that were doing some of these ads were not really trusted. They weren't not trusted, but they weren't like really changing the narrative, even though they were big names, because people thought they weren't either genuine or they were doing it just to, you know, they don't trust people. You know who I trust? If Arthur or you, Steve, or Julian says, Kevin, I saw a picture, run to see it. If I heard that from either of you, I would see it within the next week. It would be seen. I know that sounds a little nutty. I'm telling you the truth, though.
I wish I'd said that more. I really do. I
just watched a movie for the 100th time that I would tell you that about that as anybody would. And today would not be a theatrical movie, and that's All the President's Men.
Man,
one of the great films of all time does not get a theatrical run today.
It's one of the greatest films of all time. Absolutely not a theatrical movie now. I was asked to come up to meet Mr. Goldman at his apartment. I think he was in the penthouse of the Carlisle, if I'm not mistaken, or somewhere near there. And the doors open and he's there. He wanted to meet me because I was going to help with an interview he was doing on some filmmakers. And he said to me, you know, his famous quote, "No one knows anything." Well, he said, "No one knows anything, but you know a little bit more because you have some data." And I thought that was so great. Anyway, I held both of the Academy Awards, All the President's Men and Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid. One was a little heavier than the other. I forget which one. And I thought that was kind of cool. Oh, fun little tidbit. I was, my friend is Maria Janis, Cooper Janis. So that's Gary Cooper's daughter. And Byron Janis, her husband, just great pianist, interpreter of Chopin and Liszt, just passed away last year. So I went up to her apartment, and she's got 3 of Gary Cooper's Oscars. He won 2 competitive Oscars and 1 Lifetime Achievement. One of them is so heavy. I'm like, what's going on here? Well, it was the war, and they had to use like brass or something. Isn't that cool? And you really felt the difference in the weight of the Academy Awards.
Well, we have come to the end of our show.
Sadly,
but, Kevin, you've been terrific. I think we could probably go another hour if we had to, but I've got to get you on my show next. I'll tell you. I'm sure Julian would like you on his show as well. But this area of Hollywood, of understanding the genesis of how movies come to be and how they change, is just absolutely fascinating. And your book is so much fun.
Thank you so much. And I also want to ask your listeners if they would if you like what you hear, listen to my podcast. I've got great people. It's called Don't Kill the Messenger, and it's on every platform. I just have John Chu is just my guest, recent guests, everyone from Jim Giannopoulos and Ron Howard and Antoine Fuqua, directors to Elizabeth Gabler and Gail Berman and Jerry Bruckheimer. It's a really, really fun podcast that really looks underneath the surface. So I hope you do check out Don't Kill the Messenger.
Definitely. Thank you. Mike, I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you as always, Steve. Kevin, it's been awesome. I love what you've been talking about today. This is just fascinating.
Thank you so much. And you've got a great voice. I mean, I just want to, in a world where,
without smoking cigarettes.
No.
Without smoking cigarettes. Really? Pot will do that? Mike, just pot alone will do that to your voice?
A little bourbon helps. It's always a good
little
thing.
Bourbon. That's my man. All right.
All right. You've reached the end of this episode of the Tales from Hollywoodland podcast. Always remember, we couldn't do this without you. We want to hear from you, so please write us anytime at talesfromhollywoodland@gmail.com. Remember, you could also find us wherever fine podcasts are found, and now you could even find us up on our YouTube channel. If you made it this far into the episode, why not subscribe and give us a thumbs up? That's how we get through the algorithm. That's how you guys leave a review. It's always a great way for people to find us, and we would really appreciate it as always. If you're on social media, you could also find us up on Instagram and Facebook if you're into that type of thing. Before we get out of here, let's check with the guys and see what's happening this week on their podcast. Julian, who are you talking to this week?
This week is Robert Sean Leonard, who we know started out in Dead Poets Society and has done many, many movies, television, in the television show House. He had a prominent role, and a wonderful young man. He's not so young anymore. We work together, and it's a lot of fun talking to Bobby. I hope people will listen.
Awesome. Steve, what's cooking over on Saturday night at the movies?
Well, we actually veer off into a little history inspired by the great Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade movie. I interview Richard Stanley, who has written a book about a German citizen who is a real-life Indiana Jones tracking the route of the Holy Grail out of the Middle East. It's a fascinating book called Otto Rahn, Grail Hunter. And Otto Rahn was later recruited by Heinrich Himmler to join the SS to bring a supernatural element to the Nazis. And it's almost like reading copy from the Indiana Jones movie. So it's a really interesting book filled with details about the search for the Holy Grail. A lot of fun.
That sounds fascinating, my friend. I love it. Arthur, what do we got going on our show next week?
We're going to be talking about a book called When Caesar Was King. That Caesar is Sid Caesar. And when we speak about Sid Caesar, we speak about all of his writers, the greatest writers of all time, the Mel Brooks and Carl Reiners and Larry Gelbarts and more. So that's our subject matter. It was great talking with you, Kevin. It really was a lot of fun.
Thank you guys so much. Just been an absolute pleasure.
That is awesome. Kevin, thanks again. On behalf of Steve, Arthur, and Julian, thanks again for listening. This is your producer and the guy with the voice, Mike Faber. We'll see you here next time on Tales from Hollywoodland. Your Hollywood adventure starts right here. Not there, but here. Right here. And we're done, my friends.
We have a weekly podcast called Earth Station Trek where we talk about Star Trek. So we'll go live on Thursday evenings on YouTube, and then it's available after the fact as a podcast, either talking about the latest Star Trek episode or a legacy Star Trek topic.
We have been doing this podcast for 4 years now.
This is the first true Earth Station Trek live panel.
This is so exciting.
Yeah.
This is a milestone. Hi.
Your mics are really loud, and we're doing the panel on the other side.
Oh, no. Okay.
Okay. We'll be quiet. Okay.
Thanks for coming. Thank you for being quiet.
This has been a broadcast of the ESO Network. Be part of the crew and help support our shows by donating to our ESO Patreon or by shopping at the TeePublic store, which can all be found at www.esonetwork.com. The ESO Network, your station for all things geek.